Welcome to the mole. A mole is a chemist's way of counting. Just like if you have a dozen eggs, you have 12 eggs. If you have a mole of something, you have 6.02 times 10 to the power 23 of them. That means there are 6 with 23 zeros that follow. So this is a huge number. And obviously we need to be working in huge numbers because we're talking about number of atoms or number of molecules, then we're talking about large numbers. This allows us to use smaller numbers in our calculations. So in chemistry we count in moles. So if you have 1 mole of hydrogen, you have 6.02 times 10 to the 23 hydrogen atoms. If you have a mole of oxygen atoms, you have 6.02 times 10 to the 23 of them. It also works out that the mass of 1 mole, so if you have this number of atoms of hydrogen, then the mass of hydrogen would be 1 gram. If you have a mole of oxygen atoms, so you have the same number of oxygen atoms, then obviously the mass of oxygen is going to be different. That mass is 16 grams. Now you might be familiar with those numbers, and we can see a link. So hydrogen has the relative atomic mass of 1. That is the mass of 1 mole. Oxygen has a relative atomic mass of 16. The mass of 1 mole of oxygen is 16 grams. So we can say that the mass of 1 mole of any element is equal to the relative atomic mass of that element. Likewise, the mass of 1 mole of a compound is equal to the relative molecular mass that we did last lesson. So let's do some calculations with this. Now, you will never have to use this number in a calculation, but you have to be aware of this number. Okay? So, my question is, what is the mass? So what is the mass of 1 mole of oxygen molecules? Now remembering that an oxygen molecule is O2. If I had 1 oxygen atom, it would be 16, but I have 2 oxygen atoms, so the mass of 1 mole of oxygen is 32 grams. And I could do the same for what is the mass of 1 mole of carbon dioxide. 12 for my carbon, plus 16 times 2 for my 2 oxygens, that equals 44 grams. So that is exactly what we did last lesson. We worked out the MR of a compound or a molecule. We said it was called the relative molecular mass, but we can also say that it's actually the mass of 1 mole. So if I wanted to calculate the mass of 2 moles of oxygen molecules, then my mass would equal 2 times the mass of 1 mole, which I've worked out as 32. So to work out the mass of a different number of moles, we do the number of moles times the mass of 1 mole, or its MR. So that's our first equation that we need to learn. Mass equals number of moles times the mass of 1 mole, or you could just say it's mR. Now we can rearrange this equation and we could work out the number of moles. Think about what that might be. So number of moles is going to be equal to the mass divided by the mass of 1 mole, or its mR. Okay, so my question is, how many moles in 6 grams of sulfuric acid? Pause the video, work it out. So, number of moles is equal to the mass, 6, divided by the mass of 1 mole, or the mR, so 2 times 1, plus sulfur, if we look at the periodic table, is 32, plus my 4 oxygens. So if I calculate this, that actually equals 98. I get an answer of 0.0612. Use the shortened units of MOL, and you can see that I've done my answer to 3 significant figures.